Question. How many of you are as tired of this whole election cycle as I am? For what's going to come of it, certainly too much money has been spent. And if that's the best that we can come up with, we know things are not well. We can be sure of that. It's been said so many times that you get the election, you get the people that you deserve. We'll get more into that as we go further into this. For those who are looking for a title, we already had one. It's amazing how many times this happens. Tares or wheat? Tares or wheat? I don't know about you all, but it's been sad for me to just listen to the people of God. I'm not so much feeling bad about the people who claim to be atheists or agnostics or just don't care, but it's always sad to me to watch people who say that they're of God and swerve away from the Bible and start to place their faith in a political solution rather than a godly solution, which makes you give the feeling that these people have largely turned and tossed God away, and that they seem to be only interested in assembling voters who claim to vote for God, small g, as candidate. When I say small g, I mean if you honestly think that God is involved in this in some large way, other than just allowing it to happen, he always said that in the end he would take away your leadership, and I think we're seeing that happen. But we're also watching as people assemble and claim that they're voting for God's candidate, assuming that he actually is doing anything other than what he said he would do, giving us the leadership that our present stance of waffling and hypocrisy as a nation deserves. Hypocrisy and sin was woven in among the allegedly faithful men even in the days of the Apostle Paul. This is not new, so don't think, oh, these are the worst people that's ever been. No, they're just people. It's the way we've been from the beginning. Paul mentioned it to his young charge, Timothy, in the second letter or epistle to him, warning him of the changes in attitudes and the persecution that was sure to come. Let's drop anchor starting at 2 Timothy, the 3rd chapter, the 10th verse. 2 Timothy, the 3rd chapter, the 10th verse, where it says, "But you have fully known my doctrine, my manner of life, purpose, faith, long-suffering, love, patience, persecutions, afflictions, such as happened to me at Antioch, at Iconium, at Lystra. What persecutions I endured, but the Master delivered me out of all. Yea, and all who desire to live godly in Yeshua Messiah will be persecuted." Don't think that this is surprising. It's always happened throughout time, from the very beginning. It's always been that way. Verse 13, "But evil men and seducers will go forward to worse, deceiving and being deceived. But continue in the things that you have learned and have been assured of, knowing from whom you have learned them." In other words, if you don't trust me, there's not much help for you, because there's no one else here teaching this. Not right here, right now. Verse 15, "And that from a babe you have known the Holy Scriptures, which are able to make you wise to salvation through faith in Messiah. All Scripture is God-breathed and is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness, that the man of God may be perfected, thoroughly furnished to every good work. This was the last part of the second letter Paul wrote to Timothy. Being young as well as new to this more spiritual direction of the faith, Timothy was in the field and working alongside Paul and the others who taught and ministered to, that is, served the people. It's not like it is now where you've got these guys that they walk around in $1,000 suits, they have airplanes, they have this, and everybody's bringing them dinner, buying them this, doing this, and assuming that they have all knowledge about all things and come ask them questions about the least little thing. No, these people were here to serve. They were here to help. They were here to hear what the people had to say, not about what they were teaching, but about what they were living, how they were dealing with things, and how they would help them. They were there to serve the people of God in their time. Many who came along with them during this time were not always, however, of the same mind. Although they may have said all the right things, worn all the right things, you got to understand you were dealing with a circumstance where they were learning a new way of this, but some still had their tassels, they still had their talits, they still had the little box hanging from the forehead with the Torah in it, so to remind them. And they were still dealing with the old way of doing things, and some just refused to let that go. Couldn't do it. Then they did, as I said, all those outward things, all the right things. Yet somehow details are often overlooked once a level of trust is engendered among believers. In other words, even though these people all came together from different directions, when they started to hear the truth and hear it the correct way, they began to believe. And some, although there were some there that weren't exactly on the same page, but when they got before them, they believed them also, which had some problems, but we'll get into that later. It's usually at this point in the faith relationship that deception is introduced. This is one of Satan's greatest tools against the faithful. It's the hallmark of his plan of domination, and it is how he rules this world. He first ingratiates himself with you. He gives every outward impression that he is what you think he is. He gains your trust. Then he slips the lie in on you and hangs around to see how well you bought onto it. Gives you the impression that he is telling you the truth. And at this point, you trust him and you begin to, obey him. At that point, gotcha. He's got you. He did it to Eve in the Garden of Eden. And even when she went forward, knowing the orders that were given to them by Yahweh. But she went for the fruit anyway because he had convinced her that it was going to give her a new level of knowledge, and she would now be on the same level with the Almighty. So she went for the fruit anyway, knowing that it was the wrong thing to do. Adam, also being seduced into tasting the fruit, knew better. But the glowing mindset and great personality of Satan fooled them. And he moved on in this manner. Satan later got Cain in like manner as he convinced him that if he eliminated the competition, his brother Abel, he could curry favor with Yahweh regardless the quality of his offering. See, even then they were questioning, you don't have to give him the first of it. Just give him, don't give him the good fat one. Eat that one yourself. Give him that scrawny one over there on the wall. He won't care. It won't matter. Don't give him the good tomatoes. You can eat those. Give him the ones in the back. The ones that are sitting back over there in the box. But the ones that have been there for a while. The ones you couldn't sell. Give him those. It'll be okay. And Cain went for it. He was convinced, and then after that if he eliminated the competition, he could curry favor with Yahweh. As Satan developed his plan and perfected it, we find that it has two major steps toward the corruption of our will. The first is the most damaging because it can never truly be detected. It can never be detected because we have nothing to compare this new thing or this new idea to, because we've never seen it before. He always shows up at the inception of anything. Notice, as soon as Adam and Eve were created, who popped up? That's how it works. Anywhere you see him. When we first got here, who showed up? When we first started over there at the neighborhood club, who showed up? If you go back and think, you'll remember that there was always somebody that came in there with some wonderful new idea. And we had to kind of, I'm not so sure about that. It's just the way it is. He always does it. He always shows up right at the inception of an idea and goes out to corrupt it from the beginning. He makes whatever he corrupts look and feel as if it'll be a good thing. Having never seen it or heard of it before, we accept it, believing that it is a good and new thing. You know, we like new. We love new. So we grab this new thing or idea with zeal, never exposing the hidden evil within it, and those whom he reveals this idea to only see the good part. Another example, back in 1920 something or so, all of a sudden a new thing came along called television. Oh yeah, you'll know about everything. You'll be able to see what goes on anywhere in the world. You'll be able to entertain yourselves. You won't have to go to the theater because we'll have little plays right there on television. You can watch it and it's going to be good and everything will be right. And we know the rest. Don't even have to go there. Well, some probably still like it, but there's bad there too. Another one, the internet. Oh yeah. All started off so good. Seemed like such a good idea. And then, bam, the whip came down. But you have to have seen the results of the original to understand the full function of it. And then you'll see the flaws and avoid them. But in the cases with Satan, what he does, he gets there before you've ever seen it before and think, wow, this is good. But you don't think, there's some stuff that might not work out so good here either. Maybe we should rethink this, or at least consider how we use it. But we don't do that, because once we see the good, we're happy. We're jumping and happy and running with it and don't see the rock in the road in front of us. Unfortunately, because you've never seen, as I said, the scheme in any other form, you don't know it is flawed. And you believe in it because you believe it is, one, partly your idea. And two, Satan has told you that it will give you equal footing somehow. In the case of Adam and Eve, with God. In the case of us, you'll know everything everybody else knows. So wanting power, you'll never see the counterfeit nature of the plan. But Yeshua warns us of Satan's plan by warning Peter of his plans for him just before the Romans arrested him in Judea, prophesying also in order to teach his disciple Peter, after the lesson not then known, that he would surely be learning about this and have a change of heart. Let's go to Luke, the 22nd chapter, the 31st verse. Luke, the 22nd chapter, the 31st verse, where it says, and Yeshua said, Simon, Simon, behold, Satan has desired you, that he may sift you like wheat. But I have prayed for you that your faith fail not. And when you are converted, wait a minute, wasn't he already? Follow me out. And when you are converted, strengthen your brothers. The Greek here rendered converted is G 1994. Epistropho. Transitional verb that says in a moral sense to turn upon or convert onto. In the case of Peter, he would in this sense be turning back again to his original path, to return from the error of denying Yeshua when accused of being one of his disciples, when Christ was captured by the Roman soldiers in the Garden of Gethsemane. This is what Yeshua told Peter just before they went to Gethsemane to pray, where Yeshua was betrayed, captured, eventually tortured and hung on a tree. He warned Peter here that he had already petitioned to the Father to forgive him and salvage him because he knew what was truly in Peter's heart. Let's go to verse 32, right there. Luke 22:32. But I have prayed for you that your faith fail not. And when you are converted, strengthen your brothers. And he said to him, Master, I am ready to go with you, both into prison and into death. And he said, I say to you, Peter, the cock shall not crow this day before you shall deny knowing me 3 times. And he said to them, when I sent you without purse and wallet and sandals, did you lack anything? And he said, no, nothing. And he said to them, but now he who has a purse, let him take it. Uh-oh. And likewise his wallet. And he who has no sword, let him sell his garment and buy one. In other words, times are about to get hard around here. For Christ knew what was coming, and it would be hard for them in Judea up to the slaughter and the destruction of the temple later on. This happened 40 years later, 40 years after his crucifixion. And we know that the martyrdom did happen there. We know that that evening, even after warning them, that evening it all began to occur. That's when they captured him. And Peter, after going through all of this, after seeing the risen Christ, Peter was fully repentant of his failure after it was all over. Now, if you continue reading all the way through Luke 22, you'll see where he denied Yeshua 3 times before the rooster crowed that morning, and was totally repentant afterward of his doubt and of his fear. And in Acts 2, and from that time forward, Peter went boldly forward, preaching, teaching, healing, and eventually dying for the cause of the way. This is where you have to get to the point where you can see who's who here. You see, Peter was called. He signed on. He learned from the master and grew. And eventually, he died for the cause of the work. Willingly, without a problem, didn't even bat an eye. It is said in some books, nothing biblical, but a lot of people believe it, that when he was crucified, he was hung upside down. Some say it was on a cross, but if it was a stake the first time, it'll be illogical that it would be a cross this time. When that word is stauros, which is an upright pail, which is more like the post on this microphone, straight up and down, with a plank hanging across the front so you can hang them down. A little bit different. But there's a lot of things when you start to dig through this book that you have to go and find some information about how things were done at that time before you can just say, oh, I know what happened. I know what it was. Oh, do you? Are you sure? Let's make sure. That's one thing we're always told to do. 1 Thessalonians 5:21. Prove all things and hold fast to that which is good. Now, there's some logic that's called for with that. If you're holding fast to that which is good, what are you doing with that that's not good? Ball it up. Throw it as far away from you as you can, and don't let anybody convince you to go back looking for it, because you're just going to run into problems. You're just going to run into problems. But as I said, Peter was called, signed on, learned from the master, and grew, and eventually he died for the work. Peter was a seed of wheat. Cain, on the other hand, Eve, by the way, and Judas and others, Ananias, Sapphira, were sifted by Satan and found to be tares and chaff. They learned, but somehow became bitter, jealous, maybe disillusioned, and formed, and this is what usually comes when you get information that conflicts. They developed unassailable doubts. If you're not sure, how are you going to go forward into something? You can't do it. Because you're, I'm not so sure about that. But their doubt cost them their places in God's plan and in his kingdom. Here we find the dividing line that separates the two types of saints that Satan will encounter in his quest for souls to help him derail the plan of God. But you never can truly know which one you have encountered until you see the end result. For a more complete title, tares do not grow. Tares do not grow. If you study the Bible, you'll find that we have never been given a sure way to discern among ourselves who is a stalk of wheat or who is a tare. In Matthew 13, in the parable of the sower, he tells us what to do. It is yet another opportunity where God gives us space to repent if need be. But we have to take that opportunity when it presents itself to us. Matthew, the 13th chapter, the 24th verse. Matthew, the 13th chapter, the 24th verse, where it says, "Another parable put he forth unto them, saying, The kingdom of heaven is likened unto a man who sowed good seed in his field. And while men slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat and went his way. But when the blade was sprung up and brought forth fruit, then appeared the tares also. He said unto them, An enemy has done this. The servant said unto him, Will you then that we go out and gather them up? And he said, No, lest while you gather up the tares, you root up also the wheat with them. Let them grow together. What's the operative word in that sentence? Grow. Let them grow together until the harvest. And in the time of harvest, I will say to the reapers, Gather you together first the tares and bind them in bundles. For what purpose? To burn them. But gather the wheat into my barn. That's not telling you what's going to happen exactly. It's just giving you an example of how it's going to happen. It's not giving you exact. It's not saying it's going to happen exactly that way. It's just saying that this is the general principle of how it's going to work in the end. Those who are with him will be snatched out first and taken care of or put away, and the others will move forward. That's what it's saying, basically. The Bible was written in a time when the cities, such as there were small. And the country and its farmlands were large. The society was largely agrarian. In other words, they were farmers. They knew how to farm and all that goes with that. And people knew much more about growing food and were much more familiar with the basic tenets of animal husbandry than we are today. Most of us now, if you take a kid and take them to the zoo and point out at, say, something odd like an okapi, wow, that's a cat. I've seen it. It's sad. I remember when I used to take Rashida when she was little, take her to the zoo just about every week. And you go out there and you see somebody walking their kid through the air, they point at the giraffe. Look at the big horse. Sad, but it's how far we've gotten away from that whole agrarian concept of knowing what something is. And you don't even want to talk about. Out my way now, I'm starting to notice that the farms that used to be open back in the 60s, a lot of that land was lost over time. And now they've dug up, and now you can go up and down Glenwood Dyer Road and buy food now. And you see people out there, it's kind of sad. You see people look at a green pea. Wow, you gonna get some of them beans? It's just how we are. It's how far we've gotten to the point where kids now see, where does say milk come from? Jewel? It's just how far we've gone. It's just where we are. It's how things are. We're so used to someone else doing it for us until we like that. And we don't even know about it anymore and don't even want to know about it anymore. It will be the hook we may be hung on. We must learn to do it different. We must do it better, and we must do it differently. We must get back out there and learn the difference between a sweet pea and a green bean. We must learn the difference between an okapi and a horse. We got to do that. It's got to happen somehow. But you see, the society was, like, as I said, largely agrarian, and people knew a lot about growing food and were familiar with how to raise animals. We have largely lost these skills in the cities in this age, save for a few. And allowing the government to essentially legislate these chores away from us has not been a good thing, because they turn them over to corporate farming conglomerates that you've heard before, such as Cargill, Archer Daniels Midland, or the one that you've probably heard the most about, which actually was a chemical company from the beginning, but they got into food because they saw some things, or maybe Satan showed them some things that they saw that could really help them. And they now own pretty much 85% of the world's food supply. A little chemical company called Monsanto. I'm sure you've heard of them, right? Thought so. The rest of it has been handed off to the Chinese, who by now surely are with the program of genetic engineering along with everyone else, but I digress. Anyway, back in the biblical days, people knew that a grain of wheat, they knew what it looked like. And they knew what a tare looked like. At least they knew at what point in its life cycle that you can figure it out with no trouble. They knew that. And most knew to separate them when planting a wheat crop. Why? A tare is a weed. There's nothing inside of it that will grow into wheat. It is a weed. It simply takes up space, badly needed space in bad growing seasons. Space that is precious in hard times. Surely it looks like wheat. It grows on stalks just like wheat. In a field of wheat, when they first begin to grow, you can't actually tell the wheat from the tares, especially if you're city folk. The only way to know the difference is to tear open the stem, kind of like with the green bean. It's to tear open the stem. If a seed comes out, it's a grain of wheat. If it crumbles in your hand, or it's just you're not sure what that is, most likely it's a tear. And it's only fit, when it matures, it's only fit to crumble to chaff, throw it away as refuse, or burn it. We'll see why a little bit later. You see, when Yeshua gives us an example of that magnitude, there's a reason for it that you don't really understand until you begin to study these things more deeply. You see, Yeshua explained this further when he got his disciples to himself and took the time to explain this parable to them more fully. Matthew, the 13th chapter, let's go to the 36th verse. Matthew, the 13th chapter, the 36th verse, where it says, "Then Yeshua sent the multitude away," he had been teaching them, "and went into the house. And his disciples came in to him, saying, 'Declare unto us the parable of the tares of the field.' He answered and said to them, 'He that sows the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world. The good seed are the children of the kingdom, but the tares are the children of the wicked one. The enemy that sowed them is the devil.'" Just breaking it down, very simple. "The harvest is the end of the world, and the reapers are the angels. Therefore the tares are gathered and burned in the fire, so shall it be in the end of this world." And he doesn't say at what point. He just said that it's going to happen. "The Son of Man shall send forth his angels, and they shall gather out of his kingdom all things that offend, and them which do iniquity." The bottom line is this: the Father will have Yeshua order the angels to do the separating in the end time. You see, God has a very valid reason for this, and it is sound reasoning on agricultural as well as spiritual grounds. Right now, we all are here together and have to deal with a lot of things that we have not had to deal with before, societally, spiritually, and on many other grounds. You see, people seem unable to find their way in this world, partially because of the bad schooling. They're more interested now in getting you money than getting you an education, believe that. As a result, much activity is going on around us. Some that is logical, much that is neither logical or biblically sound. Satan has done his work, and he's done a heck of a job in the world, and many are going along with it. Why? Because they don't know anything else. Not because they're evil, because they don't know anything else. Some of them are worshiping him and don't even realize it. And some do fully realize it. But we don't know that from the outside. That's why we have to take God's orders and do it. Know his word well enough that when someone comes along and says, "He said do this," wait a minute, I thought he said this. Usually if you can stand up, they'll walk away. If you waffle, they'll stay there and present great doubts within your mind, and you have to be careful about that. But much of what is going on right now is simply not logical. It's not biblically sound, it's not logically sound, it doesn't make sense. And in all honesty, a lot of the doctrine that's out here now, there isn't much soundness in that either. But it's all taught. And everyone wants to believe because all of the churches want to flock together and love one another and accept whatever all the others are doing as part of God's plan. Satan's bill of goods has been sold easily to the fearful. Easily. Been sold easily to those who really only see faith not as something to die for, but just an insurance policy, just in case you just might have to die. Let's look at some numbers here. out of roughly 48 billion people that have been born on this planet from Adam to now, how many of them have died? Give me a percentage. Let's go with 100%. Now, how many have come back from the dead out of 47 billion? One. Good answer. Now, if that one says, I am the gateway and I'm the only way by which this can happen for you, wouldn't it be logical to listen to him? Wouldn't it be logical to try it and say, hey, wait a minute, we're going to try to get this thing as close as we can. And no matter what you do, you're not going to get it. But he has told us that we do this, and this, and keep our hearts in the right place. And it's all good. And I'm not using this world's all good. I'm saying that he's saying that everything I do is good. Whole different game. But we have to reach that point where we don't see faith as an insurance policy in case we might die one day. Because I can guarantee you, you're going to die one day. What day? I can't guarantee you. No one can. But we know it's coming. So it's just a matter of time. So wouldn't it be logical to prepare yourself spiritually for that day? Because whenever that day comes, that's your day of judgment. If you want to think about it that way, that's your day of judgment. So you want to be prepared to be judged on that day, any day of your life. A lot of people don't see it that way. You'll hear people, even the Bible talks about, oh, we're going to go and we're going to make money this day and do that. And he said, I don't do that. Don't you know that your life might be required of you tonight? I'm not trying to scare you, just telling the truth. It's just the real, honest truth. We don't know if we're going to be, we're going to be next year this time. Next year this time, you don't know how much daisy you're pushing up. Or if you'll still be here. There's no way to know that. You can't be sure of it. So you want to set up something where no matter when it happens, you're at least as close to right as you can be based on what you know at that time. So you want to know as much as possible, and you want to be as right as possible. So you want to put yourself in front of people that you know are at least telling you the best truth they know. If you know they're not telling the truth, I can't tell you how many times over the years I've talked to ministers and they'll say, oh yeah, I know that, but if I told my people that, I'd lose my congregation. What are you more concerned about losing? Your congregation or your soul in eternity? You might want to think about that. And when you say that to them, they kind of, you don't see them too much after that. They don't want to talk to you too much after that. Because most people aren't going to talk to a minister like that. Most people are too, he's so much smarter than I. He's so much. This book will give you everything you need to know if you read it and understand it. And those are two completely different things. But you have to do that. As I said, there isn't much soundness in the doctrines that are taught nowadays because people want an insurance policy. They don't want the truth of God. Many, because of another line of lies, they've learned to very easily fake their lack of a fear of death. You ever see those people? I ain't scared to die. That don't mean nothing to me. I ain't scared to die. It'll be interesting how those people will countenance you once these end times come to the fullness and evil that will come to them. It'll be so interesting to see these people and see what happens to their lack of a fear of death and what will happen when they see the full measure of hypocrisy and evil let loose in this world at the end time, and see if they still aren't afraid of you. We'll see. at that point. Prayerfully, many will hear the truth. They'll hear truth from either we who are around to speak it, or they'll hear it from the two witnesses in Jerusalem. But you see, much falseness is in the air right now. Even behind great cathedrals, very well-dressed, very well-spoken men who seem to have all the answers. But Satan is the author of it all. The insular nature of Pharisaical Judaism has corrupted the Israelites. The insular nature of Sunday, well, actually, don't even call it Sunday because it didn't start there. It started in the Catholic Church. They came right out and tell you, hey, why do you all even bother to come to church on Sunday? We told you all what day. We changed it because we had the power to change it. And you have people now that have been hearing that for so long until they're starting to believe it, that it's true. And everything that goes along with it, they accept that also. The Israelites were corrupted by Pharisaical Judaism. They were told initially that they were to be a beacon of truth to the world. But somewhere along the line, wonder where, they decided that Yahweh wasn't the God of all people. He was their God. Once it became insular, nobody else, they didn't want anybody else around. He was their God. It was their Sabbath to keep. When the book said that it was the Sabbath of all people, it was their holy days. When he said that I would have all people keep them. They said it's our dietary law. When they said that it was for all people because I created you so I know what should go in your body. And then they said, we don't keep 10 laws. We have 613. And we have to keep all of them. Because that's what we were taught in the Talmud. It's not in the Torah. Only 10 there. But we won't go into that. We're not here to pick at people. We're not here to attack people. We're just telling you everybody has some tricks and traps in their stuff. And we have to be careful to keep up with that. It's not simple. It's not going to be figured out in a day or two. And it's not going to be won over by an argument. It's not going to happen. They were given 613 laws, and they said that they found them in the Talmud, along with the laws Yahweh gave at Sinai, and before which they called it the law of Moses, which was wrong because who gave the law to Moses? So that's whose law it was. But in all of this separation instigated by Satan, the world has bought into all of these different counterfeits and alternative religions, and most Jews, if you really talk to them, merely go through the motions from more of a cultural point of view than from any belief in any God. Yet others have taken this mantle and run with it, separating themselves from all other believers in the truths of God, saying that, oh no, this was only for us. No, it's for all who will listen. Others have continued in other counterfeits of Satan, buying into his Sunday, a counterfeit. His Easter, a counterfeit. His Christmas, a counterfeit. It's ecstatic, loud, modern musical excesses where you don't know when you go in on Sunday whether you're in a party or whether you're in a church. They bring along with that cheap grace, easy believism, and the doing away of the 10 Commandments, declaring them nailed to the cross, and they're now told to. Let's see if we've heard this before. They don't come right out and say it that way, but if you say that you don't have to do anything, what is he saying? Same thing that someone else said. Do as you will. It is the only law. Now, who said that? Who said that? It was a church, but it was the church of Satan. The church of Satan. But it has the same effect. If there's no law, you have your own law. Because that's basically what you're doing. If there's nothing that you have to do, that means you can do anything you want to do, right? Wrong. It's all wrong. And we've all heard it before, but they have cute ways to say it in a way that you haven't heard before, but it comes up with the same thing. Do what you want instead of what he said do. Because within this scheme, it asks nothing, demands nothing, and ultimately, if it is not changed, gives nothing. Satan has cleverly counterfeited nearly everything that God has placed on the earth for our good and twisted it all, using it to divide us. In order to see beyond these counterfeits, we must study the real thing, this Bible, this true word of God. We must study it intently. We must know everything there is that can be known about it. We have to use study helps, solid study helps, that will help us to know what the word means, not only in English, because we get lost there. That's where a lot of stuff has snuck in, where we don't even know the name of God because everybody is afraid to use it because they're told, oh no, the Jew said you don't even have it, you can't even use it. They have G/D. You can't say it. It can be known, but you really have to do some digging. But you have to use solid study helps to help you know what the words of the Bible mean in their original Hebrew for the Old Testament, with a few sentences of Aramaic and Daniel, and the New Testament is largely in Greek with a couple of sentences of Aramaic. Knowing the meanings of these words in their original languages and having access to these original languages, or at least the lexicons that explain them to we who. It's an old joke that I used to hear a lot among people. Where you go to Africa, well, you know, how can you tell an African? Because usually they can do this and that and that. And then the Africans have a joke. How did you know he was American? Because he could only speak English. And that's basically how we are. Most cultures can speak 8 or 9 languages. Africans are on the African continent, you got people over there that can speak 15 and 16, sometimes with different dialects for each one. We're here in a country where for a long time, if you were a slave, it was illegal to teach you how to even read and speak English. So how can you expect it? So what's fascinating to me is how many people who came out of that circumstance read this book better than people who can speak 5 or 6 languages. Interesting, but it is what it is. But we have to understand this book according to the way it was written and according to the time it was written in, and move it forward and bring it along and make it still make sense, because it does. And it always will. Always will. But we have to learn to understand that once we know what these scriptures mean, we have to obey them according to the law of God. We have to do it. James, the 4th chapter, the 17th verse. And once you know it's there, you got a decision to make. James, the 4th chapter, the 17th verse. Therefore, to him who knows to do good and does not do it, to him it is sin. Note the actions of the Pharisees who threw a blind man out of the synagogue because he declared Yeshua to be the one who healed him, and that he being a believer at that point in the fact that he was the Son of God. John, the 9th chapter, the 37th verse. John, the 9th chapter, the 37th verse. And Yeshua said to him, you have both seen him, and it is he who is speaking to you. Speaking of, he was asking, well, who is this Son of God? He said, it is I, he who is speaking to you. And he said, Lord, I believe. And he worshiped him. And Yeshua said, I have come into this world for judgment, that they who do not see might see, and that they who see might be made blind. A little slap at the Pharisees, if you will. And they knew it right away. Notice what happened in verse 40. And those of the Pharisees who were with him heard these words and said to him, are we also blind? Yeshua said to them, if you were blind, you would have no sin. But now you say you see. Therefore, your sin remains. This is true of all believers. If we know something is true and should be done and don't do it, we commit sin from that point on. And because of all the errant doctrine in the world, now man has decided to do what God has told us not to do. They now work to weed out anyone who doesn't worship exactly as they do. What does that do? If there is somebody that's saying something that might be true that you don't want to hear it, we get rid of them. Throw them away. Get rid of them. Get them out of here. Everybody, every church at some point has had some form of excommunication, throwing them out, sending them away, ordering the members you can't talk to them. Even family members, if they don't believe exactly what you believe, throw them away. Don't talk to them. What that does is cut you off from any ability to hear to anyone that might actually have the truth. Not a good thing. Not a good thing. But everybody wants to do it. We went through it here long time ago. Oh no, we're what do they call it here? Oh, we're disfellowshipping you. How ridiculous. But as I said it now, somebody can get mad and do what they're going to do. I don't care anymore. Truth is all I care about. And we've reached the point where we all have to throw the people out that don't believe exactly as we believe. Yet Christ has already said, leave the wheat and the tares together, right? So here's another thing that you've been told not to do, and what we do, run to it. Get them out of here. Throw them out. Excommunicate them. Throw them out. Disfellowship them. Let's get them out of here. They weed out anyone who doesn't worship exactly as they do. Churches have split. Friendships have been destroyed, and lives have been torn apart by self-righteous men and women who believe it is their duty to root out and disfellowship what they believe to be tares in their own churches. And there are others who consider it their jobs to find all the false doctrine in all churches. The biggest litmus test nowadays, though, is not whether or not a church believes all things or not. You go to most television, at least Christian television, the first thing that they're going to ask, I remember years ago we had a little committee when we were with CGI, and they had to go to different stations. And the first thing that they would ask you is, do you believe in the Trinity? And you have to say no. Once you said no, the door slammed on you, and they never wanted to hear from you again. And then they'd write your name down. You call back, aren't you so-and-so? Aren't you with so-and-so? Yeah. At that point, you don't even have access. They were through with you. Happened at about 3 stations. 2 of those stations no longer exist. A couple of them have had to combine together to make another station. I won't say who they are because I'm sure somebody's watching them. You know who they are already. But their litmus test for whether or not you were a true believer was, did you believe in the Trinity? Now, by this test, let's be honest, even the Apostle Paul would be considered a heretic and thrown out of the modern church. And notice, we're not even going to get into all of the little doctrinal things. Just know this. In all of Paul's epistles or his letters, he opened them with a greeting to those who he felt sent him to them. Let's go and look at some of those greetings, and maybe we'll see how many people he's talking about by seeing them. Let's start with Romans, the 1st chapter, the 7th verse. Romans, the 1st chapter, the 7th verse, where it says, "To all those who are in Rome, beloved of God, called to be saints, grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Master, Yeshua Messiah." How many? How many? There we go. 1 Corinthians, the 1st chapter, the 3rd verse. 1 Corinthians, the 1st chapter, the 3rd verse. "Grace be to you and peace from God our Father and the Master, Yeshua Messiah." How many? There we go. Let's go again. 2 Corinthians, the 1st chapter, the 2nd verse. 2 Corinthians, the 1st chapter, 2nd verse. "Grace be unto you and peace from God our Father and from the Master, Yeshua Messiah." How many? There we go. Even to the one that everybody uses to rip everybody apart. Galatians, the 1st chapter, the 3rd verse. "Grace to you and peace from God the Father and from our Master, Yeshua Messiah." How many? Ephesians, the 1st chapter, the 2nd verse. "Grace to you and peace from God our Father and from the Master, Yeshua Messiah." We know. Let's do a couple of more. There are about 12 more, but let's go through it. Philippians, the 1st chapter, the 2nd verse. "Grace to you and peace from God our Father and from the Master, Yeshua Messiah." How many you got there? Haven't hit that magic 3 yet, have we? Let's go to one more. 1 Thessalonians, the 1st chapter, the 1st verse. "Paul and Silvanus and Timothy to the church of Thessalonians, in God the Father and in the Master Yeshua Messiah, grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Master Yeshua Messiah." Well, one more, just in case there might be one we missed. Titus, the 1st chapter, the 4th verse. Titus, the 1st chapter, the 4th verse, where it says, "Titus, a true child according to our common faith, grace, mercy, and peace from God the Father and the Master, Yeshua Messiah, our Savior." Now, there are at least 6 more introductions. And let's understand something here. Paul was taught directly by the Messiah. He was blinded on the road heading to Damascus, looking to imprison more believers. But Yeshua blinded him and set him up to go into Rome to convert Gentiles. Having been a diligent Pharisee when he was blinded and called out by Yeshua, he accepted the call and became a minister of God. That is interesting in that it is one of the few proofs of the diligence of a believer, that you can hear that you're wrong and turn on it and move forward and do well in it. But if Paul was taught by a Messiah, doesn't it make some sense that in his greetings that he would mention a Holy Spirit personage if in fact there was one? I would think so. Were they feuding? Oh, I'm not going to talk about him. No, it wasn't there. It simply wasn't there. Yet, most of your, I say television ministry for want of a better term because it gets real nebulous at that point. Most of your television ministry, the first thing they want to know is, do you believe in the Trinity? And the first thing I would ask when they ask me is, well, does Paul believe in it? I think it's a valid question because he certainly doesn't seem to understand it, although he was taught directly by Yeshua. So are you saying that Christ doesn't know the Father's plan? He doesn't know how many people are there in heaven with him? He doesn't know? Is that what you're saying? Or are you just saying, I'm just going to keep on doing this because this is all I've ever known? It's interesting in that it is one of the few proofs of the diligence of a believer when a believer sees that what he is doing or saying is wrong. He or she is willing to make adjustments to set themselves on the correct path, just as Paul did. And even as he ran into violence and eventually his death, he never strayed from the path that Christ set him on. This is the true reason that we were told to leave the wheat and tares together. Satan's malicious intent in sowing tares among the wheat is not apparent right away, save for the visual similarities, but the problems come along a little bit later on in the process. Just as in the field of wheat, the tares are the source of many problems. Tares in the churches cause problems and confusion, but the bad seeds grow to become poisonous weeds that allow only the healthiest of wheat to survive. Maybe God is using the tares to weed out other tares disguised as wheat. Tares, like wheat, have never been a marketable product. Tares are actually something called darnel, a seed. I don't know what that was. Hopefully it won't happen again. Let's do it again in case anybody didn't hear that, or maybe that was the intent. Tares are actually called darnel, a seed barely identifiable from the wheat seed in their early stages. And immature wheat and darnel look exactly alike. They look exactly alike. Just as new believers continue to hang on to the word world and believe the attitudes and mores of the world, and they will stand them in good stead, believing that they will still be helpful to them when they come into the church. Still, after many years in the faith, some find that they're still acting as babes. 1 Corinthians, the 3rd chapter, the 2nd verse. Paul talked about this. 1 Corinthians, the 3rd chapter, the 2nd verse, where it says, I have fed you with milk and not with solid food, for you were not yet able to bear it. Nor are you able even now, for you are yet carnal. For in that there is among you envying and strife and divisions. And are you not carnal? And do you not walk according to men? James also spoke of these problems in the church at Jerusalem. In James, the 3rd chapter, the 15th verse, where he said, this is not wisdom coming down from above, but is earthly, sensual, devilish. For where envying and strife are, there is confusion and every foul deed. However, even with all of this, we're told not to root up the tares. Try to work with them. For they have let me tell you something about tares. They have an amazing ability to make friends. Whenever one leaves, especially when they feel that they've been wronged, the gossip will fly, and you may lose rooted believers who leave in sympathy for these tares. To try to destroy the darnel or the tares might mean destroying much of the wheat in the process, and separating one from the other would be beyond most servants' abilities. The same problems occur in the church with rootless believers, those who are only at church for something to do, but never really grow deep roots. Only deep enough to be identified as members. They do little. They only want to be served. You'll seldom find them involved in any church activities where they actually have to get their hands on something and do it. They're just there. And this is some tares. They go on and on for years, but they never grow spiritually because they're hanging on to stuff they should have gotten rid of a long time ago, and they can't bring in anything new. This parable fully exposes the problem of evil intermingled with good within congregations, just as the same mix confronts nations, communities, and even our homes. No matter how society tries to legislate or separate out lawbreakers from the rest of society, the seeds of sin and crime will always find a new place to grow. God's church is similarly affected by Satan's constant attacks in that the genuine and the counterfeit wheat are always together in the church. Always. In the early stages, the wheat is almost impossible to differentiate from the tares. However, and this is what God was talking about, only when the wheat has matured can the tares be detected. You see, then the tares can be separated, not by the church, but by the angels of God upon his return. And sometimes they separate themselves beforehand. You see, at this point, they're gathered into bundles in the field and destroyed by fire. There's a reason, however, that darnel and tares are burned in contrast. Christ uses the tare to symbolize counterfeits within his church. Tares are weeds, as I said before. And weeds are diametrically opposite to wheat in all their properties, other than appearance. Even the botanical name of the weed, or darnel, conveys its detrimental quality. Darnel comes from the French language meaning drunkenness, having earned this name as a result of its intoxicating effect when consumed. When darnel is ground into flour, baked in bread, and consumed while hot, the eater may experience symptoms similar to drunkenness, including trembling, followed by an inability to walk, hindered speech, vomiting. In addition, darnel is commonly infected by the fungus ergot. It's a French fungus called ergot, which can cause hallucinations when consumed in small doses, but in large doses can do heavy damage to the central nervous system, and if taken heavily enough, may actually kill you. Christ's parable warns us not only to take care to avoid the false instruction and attitudes of the tares, but also to be mindful about how we treat young, immature wheat that we may mistake for tares. We must be slow to judge, remembering that church members are not all equally converted, and we're not all at the same level, and some of us might have some bad ideas, but if we stay long enough and learn enough, those ideas will be excised if we're strong enough spiritually to admit when we are wrong. We must, as I said, be slow to judge. But we have to, once you see that someone is pure in heart, even when wheat is pure in heart and understands everything, even the young wheat may not always act properly. Likewise, some brethren may not always act properly, others may seem to do the right thing, say all the right things, use all the old right bromides, but their hearts remain unconverted or even corrupted. And we cannot always tell one from the other, as some claim to be able to. I don't make any such claims. I don't know. And I don't think anybody's going to know until we get to the end. Leave the separation for the angels at the proper time. You see, in the meantime, let us continue to study. Let us strive to keep the seed of the Holy Spirit strong within us, so that whenever the time of Jacob's trouble does come, we are in God's good graces. And we're doing his will in order to make it into the kingdom. And let us make it clear to him, for he will know that we are wheat, not tares. But we don't know that. We can't be sure of it. But it's time for us to at least make a yeoman effort to make sure that we know which, and to make sure not so much be concerned about what so-and-so is, but make sure what we are. God bless you all.